Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm sure if you're living in the United States, you're feeling the heat. It's pretty hot across this country, and it's hot here at Ananda Village as well. But we hope you're finding ways to stay cool in your environment.
And if not stay cool in your environment, at least stay cool in your mind.
Yes. If you recall in the autobiography of a yogi, there's that wonderful chapter called The Heart of a Stone Image, in which Master goes to the Kali temple outside of Calcutta, and his very cynical brother-in-law is there with his sister. And the sister is weeping because the brother's so cynical. And so Master brings them to the Kali temple, made holy by Ramakrishna, the great saint of India. And he sat there meditating for hours and hours. And the hot Indian sun was beating down. And then he got up after many hours, and he hadn't had a vision of Kali. He was praying for that. But as soon as he got up and he began walking barefooted across these scorching stones of the courtyard, then he saw the image of Kali, just huge, overarching the whole complex, and he felt this wave of coolness just enveloping him and under his feet, and he could walk across those scorching stones. So it's nice to remember that Divine Mother's presence is always there. If our thoughts are have too much intensity, too much fire, if our emotions are riled up, to call on the cooling, soothing presence of Divine Mother to help us get through whatever our karma is. And that brings us to our topic today. And this being the 1st of August, we also want to say, our second day of August, that this will be our last sharing with you for a while. We'll be leaving in about 2 weeks from today actually, to have a long journey, both first to our community in Italy, where we'll be doing a number of programs and having a international Kriyaban retreat, and then on to India to do a number of programs. So we will say goodbye to you until December, when we'll pick up our webinars again. So our topic today, if you've been with us, we've been speaking on different chapters from Swami's compilation of quotes from Master, the essence of self-realization. And our topic this week is the law of karma. It sounds a little imposing. And Master starts off by, I'm going to read from the very first passage, and it's quite long, so I'm only going to read selected excerpts from the first passage. But Master begins by kind of giving the overview of the law of karma, which he quotes from the Bible, from Galatians, which, be not deceived, God is not mocked. As you sow, so shall you reap. And Master said that's essentially the law of karma. What we put out is what we harvest. Our actions draw back to us in equal proportion the same vibration and quality of our thoughts and actions. So then he goes on in this first passage, and I'll read a little bit and then comment a bit. So a visitor asks Master, how specific is the law? In physics, the law of motion states that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. In nature, effects are often very specifically and not only vaguely related to their causes. Yet we've been taught to view reward and punishment for human behavior in more general terms. If we're good, we've been told we will go to heaven. If we're bad, we'll go to hell. But people don't think of themselves as reaping specific consequences for specific deeds. So that's what the visitor commented. And now Yogananda replies, The law of karma is exact. There is, furthermore, no question of suffering in hell for eternity. How could the misdeeds of a few years on earth deserve eternal punishment? Could a finite cause have an infinite effect? To understand karma, you must realize that thoughts are things. The very universe, in the final analysis, is composed not of matter, but of consciousness. Matter responds far more than most people realize to the power of thought. For willpower directs energy, and energy in turn acts upon matter. Matter indeed is energy. So there's a number of seed thoughts here that we can explore in a little more depth. First of all, it's very intriguing that the law of karma is specific. And it doesn't, and sometimes we take this too literally. So if you go and punch somebody in the nose, it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody else will come along and punch you in the nose, but we will draw to ourselves equal amount of suffering for the suffering we put into the world. And sometimes this is a little confusing because I remember some of you, most of you probably are familiar with the story that in 1976 Ananda community was burnt down by a forest fire, and we recovered and so forth. But there was a lingering thought in my mind, well, we must have done something to attract this karma. It wasn't just random, it happened to Ananda. And then, whether true or not, a woman who had a lot of psychic ability said that we had been soldiers under the command of Swami in the army of Alexander the Great, and that we had burned many villages. And so we had the karma to have our village burned. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's interesting to think about this. I know a friend told me once that, and we're talking here about it's exact, the amount of energy we put out and the amount that comes back, but the form it comes to us isn't always exactly the same. A friend once told me that she had really, as a young woman, had anguished over the thought about whether she should get married or not, and it caused her a lot of torment. Maybe I should become a nun, or maybe I should marry, and it was a very difficult situation for her. And finally, thinking kind of literally, she asked Swami Kriyananda, she said, I must have hurt someone in the past in a marriage, and therefore I'm suffering about this issue of marriage. And Swami's answer, as always it was very subtle. And he said, he paused, and he usually didn't talk about past lives, very rarely in fact. He wanted us to focus on this life and getting out of delusion. But he said, no, I don't think so. I think you had a very unhappy marriage, and you died with the thought you never wanted to marry again, but you still had the desire for that fulfillment. And so when we're looking at cause and effect in our own life, it's very hard to discern. It's hard to untie the complicated knots of karma to see cause and effect. But I think what's more helpful for us in getting out of karma, because that's really the whole purpose of understanding the law of karma, is not just to kind of revel in past lives and past experiences, but to say, how can I find freedom? To look at areas in your life where you feel kind of generally, repeatedly, you feel unclear, you feel frustrated, like you just can't break through this limiting consciousness. Perhaps you always find yourself getting in arguments with people in positions of authority over you, or perhaps you find yourself belittling people under you, whatever it might be. But look at habitual patterns in your life and particularly ones that you feel in your heart are out of attunement with God's harmony. And understand that that's unresolved karma. Wherever you are out of attunement with God's harmony, that is unresolved karma. And whenever you are feeling in your life, maybe you have the ability to bring upliftment and hope to people who are discouraged. And you can feel that. Well, that's good karma that you're drawing on. That's something that you've resolved. And another point that's important to make here is the law of karma frees us from the necessity to judge other people. We don't need to judge anyone, no matter how much they're blowing it, no matter how evil they may be. We don't need to judge them. Again, it says in the Bible, judge not, lest ye be judged. Because judging itself means that on some level you are connected with that bad behavior pattern. For example, I never was a smoker. I tried it once or twice and it didn't work for me, so I never smoked. But so when I see people smoking or saying they're trying to give up smoking, it doesn't make any difference to me one way or the other. But if you were a heavy smoker and finally you're kind of tenuously holding on to the habit of not smoking, and you see other people smoking, well, you judge them. Oh, look how terrible they are. That's because you're not free of it yet. So judging other people means that there's something in you that's still resonating with that bad habit pattern or that habit pattern that causes suffering. So it's very freeing to see we don't need to judge people. You can have, of course, discrimination and discernment and say, well, I know if I steal from people, I'm probably going to lose what I've got. But it doesn't mean we have to judge this thief. Just understand God's got it under control. The law of karma is universal mathematics. It's impersonal. There was a song that Ananda quoted from his youth. It was the popular song, and then one of the lines was, "Rust never sleeps." And so it is with karma. Karma never sleeps. You can't avoid it. You can't run away from it. You can't lie about it. It's like math. 2 + 2 = 4. Good actions put out into the world bring you goodness and harmony in your own life. It's impersonal, it works all the time. But if you find within yourself that there's something that's tripping you up, that that karma isn't resolved, don't judge yourself, but just say, oh, I'm seeing this now. Swami said once, when you finally see a flaw in yourself, and what that means is unresolved karma, when you finally see a flaw in yourself, you should rejoice, because it's been there all along. You just haven't seen it. And that's a very good thought, that we don't judge yourself when you don't judge others, don't judge yourself when you keep, if you make mistakes, but just say, I am highlighting this, and I'm bookmarking this behavior pattern in my mind, and when I feel I'm starting to go in that direction, then I'm going to pull back. I won't go there. And it's really, if we understand the law of karma, it gives us a tool to change our behavior patterns and to improve our life and to get more in tune with God's harmony, with God's unitive vision. And so in fact, today there's a wonderful app that you can download. It's not really an app, it's an email that goes out, I'm not sure what you call it, from Crystal Clarity, called A Day in the Life of Paramahansa Yogananda. And on this day, August 2nd, 1933, in one of his magazines, Master said, I will think, I'll try to get the quote correct, I will think only perfect thoughts, and I will speak only true words, because I know my thoughts and my words are seeds that I am planting for a future harvest. And so if we can see that, don't worry, as Sri Yukteswar said, the past lives of all men are dark with many shames. Everything in the future will improve if we are making the right spiritual effort now. So if we can be, excuse me, if we can begin understanding the law of karma, that it is exact, but that we can find freedom by using the law of karma to our advantage, understanding that what we put out, what we sow, we will reap. And if we've had the pattern, the habitual bad habit pattern, let's say, of gossiping, Master said, if you have the tendency to gossip, when you start to say something negative about another person, say some critical things about yourself instead and see what it feels like. And so if we can look at habitual patterns and using that statement of Master, I will think only perfect thoughts, I will speak only true words, and from this day start planting those thoughts and words which are seeds for a future harvest. And then we use the law of karma to our advantage. And it's a very thrilling thing. You know, Master brought teachings that were so subtle, so deep, so profound, and he made them both understandable but also practical so that we can improve our lives. So let me read one more passage. I won't comment on it quite as much, and then we'll turn over to Jyotish. This is also from the from the first selection. The results of good and bad deeds are not experienced only after death. Heaven and hell are realities even here on earth, where people reap the painful consequences of their folly and the harmonious results of their right action. People seldom think of their own actions as bad. Whatever they do seems to them at least well-intentioned, but if they create disharmony for others, and thus on deeper levels of their being for themselves, those waves of disharmony will inevitably return to them in the form of disharmony. Every action, every thought reaps its own corresponding rewards. So this again brings us to the thought of, even when we're doing, not always, but often when we're doing something that may be out of attunement with God's harmony, we can say, well, I meant well. Well, that's fine. That may be true. But remember that as we put out, whatever we put out, if we're putting out disharmony, it will come back to us. So again, it comes back to being very self-honest and not justifying anything in our life. And if we've made a mistake, don't implode, oh, what a terrible person I am, I've done it again, all this. But simply remember that I'm moving forward. I am making the right spiritual effort now. I don't have it under my control yet, but I'm trying. And so to don't justify any mistakes you've made, don't laugh them off, just look at them honestly. Don't own them, but don't identify with them. You see the difference? Owning them, saying, yeah, okay, I did that. But identifying with them is, I'm a bad person because I did that. No, don't draw that conclusion. Simply say, I made this mistake and I did it, therefore I can undo it. I can move in a different direction and find the freedom away from this. So we need to understand the beauty of this principle and the freedom that it can bring us, and to look forward to a future. Think about what freedom from karma would be like, to live in this world so that we could enjoy it as God's world, that whatever happens, we could have inner freedom. It doesn't define us. And to be able to understand that if we hurt another person, we need to remember that the reason karma comes back to us, one of the underlying mechanisms, is if you hurt another person, that other person's your own self. If you help another person, that you're helping your own higher self, your own universal self. So we are all connected. There only is one consciousness, and that is God's consciousness. And to the extent that we live in awareness of that oneness, then we are able to transcend good and bad karma. There's a wonderful statement about even good karma. If let's say you're a big benefactor to others in life, there's a statement from the scriptures of India that say, chains though of gold still bind. So if you're thinking, well, I'm the one that's giving this money to the poor, that still binds you. But if you just say, God is giving this money to the poor, then you're free. And so that's the goal of the law of karma. Understanding it, working within its parameters, is ultimately to bring us inner freedom and an awareness of our oneness with God.
Davy was reading from the first one, and I will read the whole of the second little statement here in the essence of self-realization. I think most of you know, but when Swami was with Master told him, write down these things that I'm saying. I've never said them before. And so from that time on, Swami carried a little notebook, and he wrote down whenever Master was speaking things that he would say, and he collected hundreds of those statements, and then he combined them and put them into chapters according to what subject Master was talking about. And here, this chapter, are those collected statements that were not just one after another, but at various times where Master was talking about the law of karma. And so this is number 2 in this. Master, a disciple. Master, is karma only individual, or does it also affect groups of people? Yogananda, karma is action, simply, whether physical or mental, whether individual or performed by a group, a nation or a group of nations. Disciple, to what extent is an individual influenced by mass karma? Yogananda, it all depends on the strength of his individual karma. In an air crash, for example, it needn't be that all who died in it had the karma to do so. The karma of the majority in that disaster may simply have been stronger than that of the minority to live. Those, however, with strong enough karma to live would be saved, either during the crash itself or from taking that flight in the first place. The karma of a nation depends on the degree to which its people as a whole have acted in keeping with the cosmic law. I have often said that America cannot lose in the long run if her enemies attack her, because her karma is basically very good, despite a few wrong things that she has done. The karma of her present enemies, by contrast, is bad, and they shall have to pay for it. Even animals create karma. Their consciousness, however, including their consciousness of ego, is weak. Thus they are directed rather by mass karma than by individual karma. So this is a very interesting topic about individual karma and mass karma, partly because it shows a kind of stage of development in consciousness. A person whose consciousness is weak or vague, or they don't put much energy into things, they may create bad karma, and they will get the result of that bad karma. For instance, a person who's vague and kind of woolly-minded and not thinking very clearly, if they get into their car in a parking lot and they're kind of befuddled, if they back into another car, they're going to get the karma of backing into that car. So that individual karma, whether they meant to do it or not, is in this case somewhat immaterial. But because their consciousness is vague, they are more subject to group karma around them, mass karma around them. People whose karma is strong, whose individual consciousness is strong and clear, they create a stronger momentum, and they may escape. There's a term that they use in space dramas and in science fiction or in science called a gravity well. So think of the sun and think of a kind of a funnel around the sun. And so if an asteroid comes and it gets into that funnel around the sun, if its momentum isn't strong enough, it's captured by that funnel, and gradually it begins to circle around the sun, and eventually it winds down and it is drawn into the sun and burned. But if a big object has a lot of momentum and it goes that same path that that weaker one did, but because it has enough momentum, that gravity well will affect it, and it may turn it a little bit, but it won't capture it. And so we, with strong energy, and especially what makes our energy strong, the more we are conscious, the more we are understanding that our momentum is part of a spiritual momentum, then we get stronger and stronger, but the ego gets weaker and weaker. But let me continue with this mass karma and individual karma. So if our individual karma is strong and generally speaking good, we may be drawn into that well, but we won't be captured by it. We've seen many examples of this. For instance, we had a disciple of Master's who was connected with Ananda, who lived in New York, and at the day of the 9/11, when the planes went into the Twin Towers, this person worked in those Twin Towers and was supposed to go there for a meeting. And the morning of that disaster, she woke up and she wasn't really ill, but she just didn't feel very well, and she didn't feel like going to work. And so she called in and said, I'm not going to be able to make the meeting. Had she made the meeting, the probability is that she would have been killed. But she was a disciple. See, when we're a disciple, there is an aura of protection around us, because as I was using that example of the small asteroid or the big asteroid, the small asteroid is just ego-based. But as we become a disciple of a great master, we attach our karma to the karma of a master. And so there's a protective energy of the master that makes us bigger than we would be as an individual. And therefore, in this case, she was able to avoid the mass karma that, if she had not been a disciple, may well have drawn her there. There are many other examples of people who didn't go, who are not masters' disciples, or, so I'm not saying it's only our master who protects, but I know of dozens of stories that I've heard over the years of master protecting individuals, or of people being protected from the karmic results. I've never done a survey or any statistics, but as I think back, very, very, very few people that I know of at Ananda have ever been killed quickly in an accident. Some have been in an accident, some have been injured. There was one man who was walking along with a friend on a sidewalk along beside a street. A driver came who was distracted. There were two children in the back seat of the car, and this driver turned to do something for one of the children, lost control of the car momentarily. The car went up over the curb. Two people walking together, that car hit this man who was a disciple of Master. He was a resident in the community in Seattle. He had massive head injuries, terrible brain injuries. They got him to a hospital. He was in a coma with all of these injuries. The doctor said it's very, very unlikely that he will survive. And if he survives, there's almost no chance that he will be able to continue a meaningful life. The cognitive damage will be so great. The brother was there, and the doctors suggested that they pull the plug so that they pull all life support off and just let him die. Fortunately, he had given power of attorney to the leaders of the community in Seattle, and they said, no, this man is a disciple of a great master. Let's not pull the plug. Let's give it a few days and see what happens. They had prayers all over the Ananda world for this man. They themselves had people in the hospital, in that hospital room, 24 hours a day, and that continued. That man pulled through that, gradually has gained, and to see him now, you would never know that he had been in an accident. Now, that was individual karma that he went through that, but kind of the mass good karma of being a disciple and of having the group of people around him that added to that individual karma to help protect him through that. So as we add to ourselves through satsang, through attunement with the great master, our individual karma, which can be somewhat mixed, is added to by the pure, perfect karma of Master, because he is a perfect example, a manifestation of God who was conscious of it. And so his good karma protects the disciples who have attuned to him. And it isn't magic or anything, it's just that we're part then of a larger mass that isn't affected by the gravity well of so many mass karmic events. So you get the picture. Now, our job in this whole picture is to try to free ourselves from the consciousness of ego. See, Master has this enormous good karma, not because intrinsically he's greater than you or me. We're equal. Our souls are equal to Master, equal to Christ, equal to the greatest masters ever born. It's just that they're aware of their unity with God, and we're aware of separation. And so our job is to overcome that individual separation or ego. And as we do that, to the extent that we do that, we begin to resonate with the greater mass karma, mass energy of God, which is perfect. And so our job in this whole thing is to do our sadhana. And gradually as we do our sadhana, we begin to become free of the ego, and therefore free of the effects of karma that come back. Because if we're egoless, the action, the energy of the action goes out, but the ego's not there, so it has no place to return. So Master said that he sends out his actions, create karma, but they come back. There's no ego of the Master for them to come. So those being good actions and good karma, the good karma comes back to those who are close to him. And so we reap that. Eventually we keep working on our sadhana, and then we become free. You know, kriya comes from the same root as karma. So the two are connected in their Sanskrit root. Karma means that action which binds. Kriya means that action which frees. And so we who are kriyabans, or kriya is one of the techniques, so any of the techniques that we do will free us. Gradually, as we do that more sincerely, with more intensity, we get freed of ego and freed of karma. So even doing Hong Saw, for instance, we might think, well, this is just a breathing exercise, and it's nice, I'm getting a little calm from it, but how does that affect my karma? The seed mantra that we're working with is the mantra of I am He, I am He, I am God, God is me. And as that begins to move from affirmation to reality, then we move away from the ego and away from the effects of our actions, good or bad. They won't return because we won't be there for them to return to. But it's a long process, and it takes a long time, at least from our standpoint. Once we're free, we're free from also the delusion of time. But that's subject for another talk. Okay, I'll read one more, and as Davy did, I won't comment nearly so much on this one because we want to leave time for questions. Okay, this is the last in this chapter. It's number 7. A disciple. It all seems hopelessly complex, Master. Just think how many laws are passed in a single year by the government of one country. The laws of the universe, then, must number infinity. The Master, chuckling, really, it isn't quite so complicated as it seems. In the Bhagavad Gita, the forces of evil are described as many, while those on the side of good number only a few. Jesus Christ, too, described the way to perdition as a broad highway. But he said, straight is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life. The ways of error are endlessly winding, but the way out of error is direct. A few simple rules will suffice, and the most important of these is simply this: love God. To one who loves much, Jesus said, much is forgiven. Isn't that a simple, clear, direct answer to all of the complexities? Sri Yukteswar Master's Guru said, God is simple, all else is complex. So all these complex, rational, the mind going here, and what if I did this, and if I did this 10 lifetimes ago, and then is it still going to affect me? What about that? And how about that guy? He deserves really bad karma. It's just endless kind of mental abstraction and thousands of thoughts. And when we sit to meditate, really there is only one thing that's important, and that is, as we sit to meditate, to allow the heart to love God and be receptive of God's love for us. Everything else is secondary. That also means to love that particular channel that God has sent to us. So love the Guru and feel the Guru's love for you. It's really that simple. The reason that we do practices, sadhana, like Hong Saw or Kriya or meditation or serve the Guru, is just out of love and out of attunement to increase that sense of universal connection and decrease the sense of individual reality. I just watched a video, about a half-hour video of a interview on, I think it was a Malaysian television station, of the woman who wrote the book Dying to Be Me. It's a beautiful book and well worth reading. And if you go to YouTube and you type in Dying to Be Me and interview in Malaysia, I'm sure that you'll end up finding this interview. But she's talking about her experience. For those of you who don't know, this woman had very, very severe cancer, to the point where her organs were all shutting down. She was the doctors gave her minutes or hours to live. Nobody expected her to live. She'd gone down to under 100 pounds, 80 pounds or so, and she was just in the final stages of death, in a coma. And then she had a near-death experience where she felt herself part of the universal force of enormous love. She looked with great clarity back on her life and just realized that she drew that cancer to herself because of her consciousness, and she didn't need to. And then she returned. Within a week, she was up out of the hospital bed and completely free. So we can be completely free, and it can happen very quickly, but it's all according to the level of consciousness, and it's only consciousness. So we'll end with that for this part of it, and then we'll take some questions.
Thank you, Jyotish and Devi. The first question is about a statement that I had heard, that karma is an expression of divine love. Can you talk about that, especially when it's difficult karma? How can it be an expression of love? I can see when it's a lesson, perhaps, but some things don't make sense that way.
Okay, shall I start or you?
Yeah, you can.
Okay. Well, I think there's two ways we can look at this. First, as you know, the divine is both impersonal and personal, both infinitely large, extending to the farthest reaches of the cosmos, and also individually small, dwelling within our hearts. So, in a sense, the law of karma is impersonal, because it just, whether there's a human being alive on earth or not, the law of karma exists. It's part of the fabric of the dualistic nature of reality. And so just as we understand that in this manifested world, it's an interweaving of light and dark, of good and evil, of joy and sorrow. One might say the law of karma is one of the mechanisms that puts the dualistic nature of the universe, it puts it into play. And so that's why if we're putting out evil, then evil comes back, because if it wasn't a dualistic universe, then evil would just stand alone. You could just do an evil action and out there it would be. But because the balance needs to be reconciled. So in that sense, the law of karma is very impersonal. But on another level, just as the guru is God's channel to individually work with sincere seekers, the law of karma is God's way of teaching us. Just as a mother working with their child, a loving mother, doesn't say, okay, well, just go ahead and put your hand on that hot stove, dear. The mother, if he sees the child's going to put the hand on the stove, says, no, don't do that. It's going to bring you suffering. And so, because we have free will, Divine Mother can't prevent us from acting in ways that will bring us suffering. But the law of karma is her way of teaching us that love. And where does the love come in? Because the divine is trying to bring us to cosmic consciousness, to ultimate wisdom. And the only way we can do that is by, in this dualistic world, to see the results of our actions. And if we were perfect beings, totally united with God, we wouldn't need the law of karma, but we're not. And so the law of karma is the mechanism, and you can say it's love, but it isn't love as a sentiment or an emotion. It's love in the sense of the divine calling, the Divine Mother calling her children back to her through the lessons one learns, often painful, in this world, that these actions will bring you suffering. See those results and don't do them again. So ultimately, it is the ultimate act of love, but not always, one can say it's tough love, because it's not always, oh, there, it's okay. You broke the laws, I'll forgive you. It's not a matter of forgiveness or not. It's just a matter of the dualistic nature of reality achieving equilibrium.
I might add a little bit. We often think very wrongly about what is good karma and what is bad karma. We tend to think good karma are those things that we like, and bad karma are those things that we don't like. But that's a very wrong way to pick up the whole puzzle. Swami gave a very clear definition once. He said, good karma is that which brings us to God, and bad karma is that which takes us further away from God. It's all consciousness. So good karma is that which clears our consciousness or increases our desire for God. And so things that we don't like happening to us can impel us toward God, and that's good karma. But we don't like them, and therefore we say, oh, that's bad karma. Getting sick, for instance. Many great saints started or were vaulted in their journey toward God by near-death illnesses, very severe illnesses. So you think illness is bad karma? It's bad karma if you take it mentally in a way, oh, this is terrible, it's unfair, I don't like this, God is punishing me, I hate God, and it draws you away from God, then it's bad karma. If you think, oh, boy, let me rethink my life. I don't maybe have very much time left. Let me clear my consciousness. Then it's good karma. That which takes you to God is good. That which pulls you away is bad. And Master said that everything in this life is for our education and entertainment, but how few are either educated or entertained. And so always try at least to begin the thought that whatever comes to me is coming out of God's love. And if you do that, maybe it won't change those circumstances, but it will change your consciousness. And that was almost the highest prayer of one of Master's most advanced disciples. Change no circumstance, change only me. Okay, next question.
The next question is something that I thought I understood you say, Jyotish, that karma, as you get more free of your ego, you get more free of karma. So in freeing karma, what happens to that karma? Does that mean that we can just not have to pay the piper kind of situation when we get free of karma? Or where does the karma go?
Okay, let me phrase it another way. Really, we aren't free of karma, we're free of the effects of karma. And so let's say that we did something in the past. Let's say that we hurt a group of people. Maybe not maliciously, we just did something that hurt a group of people. We were a legislator, we passed a law that law ended up impoverishing a group of people. And so because we participated in that, we sent out a wave of karma. Now let's say that since the time, and we had during that time kind of a judgmental law and order, right is right and wrong is wrong kind of attitude. And that it doesn't matter what happens to people, they deserve what they get. That kind, I won't go on. So we acted in that way, and it sent out that wave of energy. Now, maybe several incarnations have passed. That wave of energy is coming back, and it's still coming back to us. But now we have changed our consciousness, and instead of moving in that same direction, we have changed our direction. And now we're moving in another direction that says, I just want to love people. I just want to help people. I just want to help people be happy. And we're moving strongly in that direction. Yes, that karma is coming, but we aren't going to go smack like that. It's going to be more like that. And that karma is same force, but it won't hit us in nearly as strong a way. If we're completely free of karma, that force gets sent out. It can't go smack because there's no thing left there to smack. So we're just free of that then. Okay, I hope that answers it.
I'll add a little bit more here too. You know, the guru-disciple relationship is also very important to consider here. You remember an autobiography of a yogi where Lahiri Mahashaya is with Babaji and his band up in the Himalayas, and recounts a story that a young man they were standing around a large sacrificial fire, a yajna, and Babaji takes a burning brand, a burning log, and scrapes the man's shoulder, touches his shoulder lightly, and one of the disciples says, Master, what are you doing? And he said, would you rather see him be burned to death as his past karma dictates by me giving him this little touch, then I'm expiating the whole of that karma. So in the wisdom and love of the guru, he can also help you to expiate, accelerate the karma, that you don't have to go through the whole of it. And remember that passage that Jyotish read quoting again from the Bible, and I don't remember the exact passage in the Bible what the story is. Maybe you all remember, but it's much is forgiven because he loved much. I think it might have been the woman taken in adultery, but I'm not absolutely sure. But in any case, it says much is forgiven because he loved much. And so it's the same principle. By loving God, we are living in a less egoic state of consciousness, and which allows the guru to expiate our karma more rapidly and more easily. So remember that loving God helps us to burn up our karma.
So if you want to look it up, it's from Luke 7:47, and I'm not one of those people who can memorize the Bible and quote it back. So if you want to follow up on what Davy said, Luke 7:47.
So we just have two last questions. One is, I might be a short one, I'm not sure. What did Yogananda or Master say anything about animal karma?
Yeah.
Yes, he said, and I'll answer this very briefly, that animals don't create individual karma, but they may have a little bit of mass karma. But he said specifically, if a tiger kills a prey, even though it's wrong to kill, the tiger doesn't incur karma because it's just being driven by instinct. It's where free will comes in, and by choice you choose to do something, and with the motivation of harming something else, where karma really comes in.
But you just briefly, so we can get to our last question. You know, when I was speaking with a woman on Sunday after our Sunday service who had a service dog with her at the Expanding Light, and she clearly wasn't blind, but she said she has trouble with her legs and she falls over a lot, and the dog is just always right by her to keep her from falling. And so you see some of these service animals that really, they must be high souls, and you think they're getting good karma for what they're doing. So that's more than instinctual. That's really kind of conscious desiring to help. Okay, last question.
The last question, are there a few essential attitudes that you can recommend for working with our karma constructively?
Okay, the first attitude is to be grateful to everything that comes, and this sometimes is difficult. I've had an experience in my own life where I had a diagnosis of cancer. I don't talk about it very much. Anyway, I had a diagnosis of cancer, and it was a shock. And so it took me about 5 minutes in a state of kind of processing that. And then because of long immersion in these teachings, I just said, Master, I'm grateful for absolutely everything that comes to me. I know it comes from you. And so that first attitude of gratitude in the face of whatever is coming just acts like a force field and shields you. So accept what's coming, be grateful for it, be thankful for it, and then ask the question, what can I learn out of this? I want to be completely in tune. If this is sent to me as a lesson, let me understand what the lesson is here. Let me learn from it, and let me finish, let me complete my lesson, and then finally don't try to avoid it. That's what Christ meant when he says, if someone slaps you on one cheek, turn the other cheek and let him slap you there too. Meaning, if karma is coming for you to get a blow, don't say, okay, it's unfair, I'm not. Get it all done. Say, okay, I want to learn, I want to finish this. Bring it on, Lord, bring it on, and help me, if anything, not to avoid it, but to have the right attitude about it.
And I will offer you the end of the story, the rest of the story. Jyotish had surgery, and that was 5 years ago, and everything is totally fine now. Everything is all clear. So unless you're wondering, well, what happened there? And then I would just add this as a closing attitude for working with karma. Never admit defeat. Live your life as a victorious hero. If you can say, no matter how much bad karma I have, I am more clever than karma. I am more clever than duality. I will find my way out of this. And if you keep trying, no matter how many times that old karma slaps you in the face, you just stand up again. As Master said, be bloodied but unbowed. He was a warrior. And to get through our karma, we can't be little wusses. We can't be little, oh, this happened, and what about that happened? Swami often used the analogy, if you're playing tennis, if someone hits you a really hard ball in a very difficult angle to get at, you don't say, oh, look what happened, he hit the ball. You do everything you can to get the ball back at him. So when karma comes to you, don't have self-pity. Don't be a victim. To find God, we have to have the attitude of a victorious soul, that we can get out of our karma. And if you have, with that one single thought, you can find freedom. If you say, I will never accept defeat. No matter how many times I fall, I will pick myself up and keep going. And it's such a joy to have been on the path for a number of decades, and to see the victory in the eyes of people that I have seen who came on the path about the same time I did, and just to say they have hung in there, they have found their way to, whether their karma is completely gone yet or not, but they have found the way to victory, and it's just a matter of time. This is true of all of us. So Master is leading an army of victorious souls, and he is holding high the banner of God realization. We need to pick up our swords of willpower and discrimination and fight this battle right behind him, and he will lead us to victory.
I'll just end with these words. It's a paraphrase of Jesus. I'll paraphrase it in this way. The whole of overcoming the law of karma is this: love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy mind, with all thy soul, and with all thy strength. And the second law is like unto it: love thy neighbor as thyself. Do that, and you'll get out of karma.